everyone. I'm very happy to welcome you all here. My name is Marlene, and this is EUROSTUDENT Talks, as once every month. And I'm absolutely happy to have you all here. Last month it was a break from the talks for me, so the happier I am to be here today. And I hope that you're as excited as I am, because we're going to talk about a very important topic today. About financial aid for students. As you all probably know, the access to higher education is widening, and the share of people who acquire higher education is bigger nowadays. But one of the great obstacles for doing that is still the financial situation and the socioeconomic background of students. So today we're going to focus on financial aid, as I said, and our first presentation will be about grants and their impact to access to higher education. And then in our second presentation, we will talk about financial aid and academic experience. So this is our plan for today, and I'm very, very happy to have here three wonderful researchers. Our first presenters will be Federica Laudisa and Samuele Poi. Federica Laudisa holds a sociology degree and a master's in public policy analysis. She is a researcher at RES Piemonte, and her main fields of study are student support policies, both at the regional and national level. From 2017 to 2019, she was a member as an expert at the National Observatory for University Student Affairs. And then I'm very happy to have here Samuele, who is co-author for the research that Federica and Samuele will present. Samuele is an assistant professor in economic policy in the Department for Sustainable Development and Ecological Transition, and adjunct professor at the University of Piemonte Orientale, Vercelli. His research mainly focuses on counterfactual impact evaluation, public policy analysis, labor and social policies, and welfare. And our third speaker, the second presentation, will be done by Loris Pergolini, who is an associate professor at the University of Bologna and affiliated researcher at the Institute for Evaluative Research on Public Policies. He has a doctorate in sociology and social research from the University of Trento. Loris conducts research in the field of counterfactual impact evaluation, with a focus on policies designed to widen participation in higher education. His research interests include the study of educational inequalities, social cohesion, and the cultural aspects of aging. So now you know who will be the presenters. Once again, hello, and we are very, very happy to have you here today. I think that if Federica and Samuele are ready, we can start and share the screen, and let's go, I think.
Okay, good morning, everyone. And first of all, thanks to Marlene and all the EUROSTUDENT staff for this invitation. We are very pleased to present our research today. As the title suggests, and as Marlene already just introduced, the topic we will be exploring in today's presentation is whether informing secondary school students about financial aid affect undergraduate enrollment rates. But let me start by explaining why we decided to investigate this topic. We all started, We all started with a request from EDISU Piemonte. EDISU Piemonte is the regional body for student services, somewhat similar to the Studentenwerk in Germany or the CRUS in France. EDISU Piemonte asked us to investigate whether secondary school students know about financial aid programs and whether they know about EDISU Piemonte. But However, we already knew the answer, and that is no. In fact, in 2016-2017, we carried out an analysis based on administrative data and found that a large proportion of eligible students enrolled in the first year at 2 universities in Piedmont did not apply for a grant, as many as 58%. We hypothesized that that is due to a lack of information. Based on the assumption that students are unaware of financial aid options, there was no point, as we say in Italy, in trying to discover hot water. So we developed a new research question. Does informing students about financial aid influence their decision to enroll in higher education? How did we respond to this question? We conducted a randomized controlled trial. First, we selected a representative sample of high school seniors in Piedmont. We randomly selected 30% of high schools in our region. Next, we randomized the sample into 2 groups, treatment and control classes. We adopted a stratified sample design considering 2 strata: school type, high schools, technical schools, and vocational schools, and geographical area to cover the whole region Piedmont. Then, between February and June 2023, we surveyed all students in class using a computer-assisted web interviewing questionnaire. The questionnaire included questions to assess the students' level of knowledge about financial aid and their future intentions. Immediately after administering the questionnaire, an information meeting was held in the 3 classes. This meeting consisted of a 25-minute PowerPoint presentation, providing details about eligibility requirements, application procedures, and amounts of the grant. Finally, we interviewed all students again approximately 6 to 7 months after they graduate from secondary schools to determine how many had decided to continue their studies at university and how many applied for a grant. In the end, we compared the enrollment rates in tertiary education between the 2 groups, which in theory differed only in their participation in the information meeting, to estimate the impact of the informational session. In all, 68 schools joined the research project, which means 85% of the initially selected students. Of the 60,900 students present in the classroom at the time of the survey, there were more than 60,500 respondents to the questionnaire, distributed almost equally between the treating and the control groups. Ultimately, we interviewed 21% of the total number of senior high school students enrolled in Piedmont in 2022-2023. Let's now return to the research questions. The first question is, are students aware of the scholarship and the Disu Piemonte? As we expected, the answer is no. Fewer than 9% of the students replied that they knew about Disu Piemonte, the organization that manages and provides the scholarship. In contrast to 72% that have never even heard of it. It's important to note that these interviews were conducted towards the end of their last year of high school, which makes the students' lack of awareness even more concerning. Moreover, only 6% of students correctly identified the criteria for accessing the grant. Nevertheless, using a probed regression, we found that being aware of a Disu grant and having intensively participated in guidance activities are 2 factors significantly correlated with the intention to continue studies after graduating from high school. There are also other factors that increase the probability of enrolling at university, which are more widely recognized in the literature, such as being female, attending high school, having a high average grade, having parents who are university graduates. Let's now continue with analysis of the second main research question. Does informing students about the scholarship influence further study? My colleague Samuele Poi will now answer this question.
Okay, thanks. I guess you can see my slides, so I can continue.
Yes.
Thanks. My goal is to introduce the audience to main results of our study. As already Federica said, we are interested in see if informing students about the scholarship causally produce an impact on the choice to enroll at university. From our main result, we can conclude that the answer is yes, it does, because in the control group, the enrollment rate is found to be 63.4. In the treated group, the enrollment rate university track is 66.2. So the difference can be assumed to be the causal effect, 2.8 percentage point. This is, of course, our baseline main results. Now, can go deeper into effect heterogeneity. First of all, interesting to see if there is effect based on the gender of a student. And here we see that the intervention was particularly successful in increasing higher education participation among female students, resulting in 4 percentage point difference compared to the control group. So an effect is higher for female students. Also interested in see effect heterogeneity based on other characteristics, and here you can see that the information session had a notable impact on students reported participating in few guidance activities. In other words, the distinct form. And the effect was higher also among those who were undecided about continuing their study due to economic consideration, with an increase of 8.3 percentage points. These are, of course, the results of our randomized control trial, so comparing what we observed in the control and in the treated group. However, the effect was null for vocational track students. So for students who were enrolled in vocational and technical track, we don't see a positive effect of the information section. In this case, we wonder whether a more intensive information program may have been necessary, as the vocational track is, as we know, the least college-oriented school track in the Italian secondary education system, and conversely is the most labor market oriented. Finally, we conclude with the third research question, that is, does the rising scholarship awareness boost grant application? Informing students about grant opportunities not only influence college enrollment, but also significantly boost the number of grant applications submitted. Here we see the percentage of students among those who enroll at university that ask for the grant. In the 3D group is higher, 7.4 percentage point. This impact is even more pronounced among students with lower educational family background, showing an increase of 15.9 percentage points, who are likely the main beneficiary of financial aid program. So I go to the conclusion and policy consideration. Of course, our study underlined that there are significant information gaps regarding student financial aid. This is actually the starting point of our research. It's crucial to increase student awareness of scholarship opportunity, as we show that this information gap can be somehow a problem for further study, and significantly influence university enrollment, especially for those who are undecided for economic reasons. In other words, grants can make the difference in choosing whether to enroll in university. For vocational graduates and those undecided for reasons other than economics, such as perceived difficulty of university studies, anxiety, or uncertainty about their ability, unclear ideas about which course to undertake, our main message is that maybe other type of support should be implemented. What is the percentage of students who were undecided to continue study based on other reasons? 15% more or less. And this indecision was also based on really different questions. Here you can see a list that students underline in the question and list. Thanks for attention.
Thank you, Federica and Samuela. Actually, we already got the question to the chat during the presentation, and Yannis asked that, could you please explain a bit what is a probit model? You mentioned that.
Okay. The result that Federica presented was where the average marginal effect on the probability of being sure or not to enroll at university. So we can see some characteristics such as gender or family background, etc., are in relation with this position on to continue or not studying. So it was a probit regression.
Okay.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions from our listeners, either to the chat, or you can just raise your hand and ask. Yeah, Yannis is asking, please.
Thank you. I am very pleased by the presentation of both persons who had the kindness to explain that very significant work to us. And I would like to make a comment on the data that Samuele exposed. I saw that students who think that studying at the university is difficult were at a relatively high place. I think they were second. And I think that this is a challenge for us all, and this figure must exist also in other countries, that there are so many students who think that studying is difficult. And I guess this calls for action, for further research. This is what I believe. Thank you.
Thanks. I agree with you. I think that this could be a challenge also for other situations, other countries, as we observe in Italy, in Piedmont, particularly. Thanks. I agree. Sure.
Yeah, we have another question in the chat as well from Ines, that how did you choose the schools? How did you get the contact information and the pupils that participated in your study?
Thanks for the question. We randomly selected the schools based on the administrative data. The office, the regional office, the scholar regional office gave us the data set, and we randomly selected the schools by sampling design, stratified sampling design. So we selected the schools and all the classes in that schools. And we went to the schools in the class, and we had the survey by a questionnaire online. I hope it's if Samuele he wants to integrate my answer, but was like that.
Okay, thank you. Loris is asking also, just out of curiosity, that how much did the program cost?
More or less, it cost 70,000 euro. 17,000 euro, especially because we adopted some people that went to the school, some professional people that went to the school. So we have to pay the agency that went to the school to administrate the questionnaire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have some questions as well. You very nicely showed how participating in a 20-minute informational session had an impact and how it raised students' awareness. How do you see it? Should this awareness raising always be done through a kind of informational session, or could there be something similar that could work as well as this kind of approach did? Have you discussed it? Have you thought about it? And how do you see that?
And thanks, Marlene, for your question, first of all. And I think the problem now in Italy that the students are not informed at all. So even in a minimum activity, like to give us, for example, presentation, there is an application, an app, each school has an app. So we just posted the presentation, for example. We don't know if this kind of activity could be the same effect of to go into the school, go into the classes, and do a presentation. I don't know if there will be the same effect, but it's sure we should inform students, because no one informs students about available financial aid in Italy in this moment. Nobody, not the university, not the regional body, not the ministry. So it's just I don't know, how can I say, how can I say, when informal way, the information it's in an informal way, just friend by friend. I don't know if I can, Samuele, if you could help me to explain the way in that moment, the information, students can receive the information just in an informal way.
Yeah, I can imagine that even if the information is somewhere up there at web pages or something, students like automatically don't get there. Like in that sense, making a presentation so that they're all in one class seems to be very reasonable. But there's another question in the chat from Yassin, who says that he finds your results very interesting. Thank you. Would you make the assumption that students who feel they might not fit in higher education could have been felt welcome to enroll with these information sessions? With other words, could the function of this information session be providing informational contents on available grants as well as an incentive to enroll in higher education?
I think so. I think so. I think our results show that it would be an incentive to enroll in higher education. This is the result. This is impressive, also for us, an impressive results. We didn't expect this result. I want to be honest, because it was a so small intervention. And so we didn't expect it was such this impact, both on the application grant and in the enrollment rates. It wasn't expected for us, by us.
A positive surprise.
Yes.
I was also wondering, do you know whether other universities in Italy have tried something similar in that sense? That have they tried to test something themselves like this, that they go to schools and have this informational session? Do you know anything similar?
Yes, there is a similar study, but with different aim. So it's not really comparable, and they didn't find any impact on the enrollment rates. But it was they gave some information about the occupational rates, about the yes, it was a different session, informational session. So it's not really comparable.
Yeah, different.
Comparable, yes.
Yeah. Any other questions before we move on to the other presentation? Any hands? Any messages to the chat? Seems that at the moment, okay, there is still one. Will there be an implementation of your results in Piemonte region? Do you know something about it?
Yes, I know, but no, there will be an implementation at the moment. It's a quite difficult to, I don't know, to mix the research results with the politics action. This is the problem. We show a result, but it's difficult to implement this result in the reality, in the politic actions. So we hope so. We hope so. We will push in this direction, but it's not easy.
But do you see that it's because of just policymakers don't take this initiative, or is it about the resources, lack of resources, or why do you think why it's so complicated to really transfer this very good knowledge that we now have, that what should work, to the reality?
Yes, I think it's not a question of resources because it's not expensive to do a PowerPoint presentation and to send to all schools, but I think this is I don't know, it's not the main focus. I think it's not the main focus to increase higher education participation in our government. It's I don't know if I can say that, but I think so. It's not the main aim.
Mm-hmm. So it's the question about political priorities.
Yes, exactly. I think so.
Yeah. Okay, thank you once again, Federica and Samuela. It was very interesting, and thank you for all the comments and questions. I think we can move on, and then Loris can tell us about financial aid and academic experience. So please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can see the presentation and hear me. First, thank you very much, Marlene, for the organization staff for the introduction. And also a big thank to the EUROSTUDENT for the invitation. I will be very happy to present you this first results of my paper. That's about the role of financial aid in academic experience. I can anticipate a couple of points. First, this is not a causal study, like the paper by Federica and Samuele. It's more a descriptive paper, but it can be, in any case, interesting also for the policymaker, for the result that I will going to show you in a bit. In that case, I will intend financial aid, both in terms of grants and loans, and we will see that my presentation is trying to disentangle the effect of these two kinds of financial aid. Then, for what concerns academic experience, I will explain a bit better the concept later in the presentation. So, this is the summary of my presentation. I will be very short of the ground and motivation because I'm sure that we are on the same page on this point. Then I will try to show you the main research question, the theoretical model that guided the choice for the data, the choice of the variables, and the methods. Then I will go on the main results of the paper. As I said before, these results are still preliminary, so every kind of comment, suggestion are more than welcome. And then I have a last slide in which I will try to summarize the results and to say something about the future step of my project. In general, we know very well that there has been in the last decades an increase in educated workforce. So we have a very high raise among young people, in particular in in students with a tertiary degree. In particular, we can see that has been widely increased in the last 20 years from about 27% to about 50% of the workforce. But the main problem is that social inequalities are still persistent. So we know very well that coming from a wealthy family or having educated parents can still have a huge effect on enrollment rate at the university and also on completion rate. So this kind of disparities are still a concern in our societies. The key policy tool that is being used is the one connected to financial aid. And financial aid are often used to address this kind of educational inequalities in education. We know that other scholars tend to say that maybe it will be more useful to start early with educational policy, for example, in primary or in pre-primary education. But I won't touch this point in this presentation. I will focus mainly on the role of financial aid. What we know is that under the umbrella of financial aid, we have several measures: grants, loan, tax relief. In some countries, we have these programs such as incentivized saving and so on. As I said before, in this paper, my main objective is try to look at the grants versus loan and the effects of this kind of financial aid on the overall academics experience. For what concerns grants, we know that having a grants improve academic performance, both in the US and in Europe. There are a lot of causal evidences on this point. So we are quite pretty sure that they can have a positive effect. There are still some controversial results for some single university, but overall, it seems that grants can work very well. On the other points, we have loans that are widely debated financial aid. A couple of papers, in particular the one that I quoted here, the Widerspan paper, the paper by Widerspan, tend to say in some cases it can be effective in boosting university enrollment. In particular, this paper is about the effect on community college in the US. So it's a very, very peculiar and specific case. At the same time, we are all aware that loans carry the risk of default and can create financial stress to students during the university studies. And this financial stress can be negatively related to academic success and academic experience. And at the same time, more research is needed also on the cost and benefit of students' loan. So the debate on this point is still open. I have just one slide about the theoretical framework. Usually, when we talk about financial aid, we have in mind the rational choice framework, in which the utility of a degree, so my choice to enroll at the university, is a function of the expected benefit, my labor market returns, the probability of success. If I'm a good student, I can feel to be good enough to enroll and to complete the university, and then we have the cost that can be direct and opportunity cost. And usually all the financial aid try to work on this last point, so try to reduce in few words the cost connected to higher education. How can it work? Usually in this literature, the idea is that we have the financial aid. Financial aid should reduce the cost connected to higher education, and this kind of cost reduction should in some way have an effect on the time allocation of students. So if I have enough resources, I should decide to work less during the lecture period, and maybe I can devote more time for studying and to attend the lectures. All this stuff together should have a positive effect on academic experience and then also on academic outcomes. Here, the point is to try to understand if also the loans can have the same effects, because I said before, loans can come also with financial stress and with this kind of feelings by the students. So maybe if I know that I have to repay my loans in the future, I can also decide to work more during the study or to feel more pressure during my academic life. So this general discussion leads to these two very easy and very simple research questions. So does grants and loan have the same effect on academic experience? And then is there a mediating effect of work activity and study intensity? So if we go back to the previous slide, I would like also to say if this kind of thing happen in the reality. So if the role of financial aid passes through these two channels. How can I do that? I will use data from the 7th round of EUROSTUDENT survey. And in particular, in the data set, I have 13 European countries that you can see the list here in the slide. As you know better than me, EUROSTUDENT survey is very rich in information. So we have a lot of information about academic life, but at the same time, we have also very useful information about socio-demographic characteristics and in particular about social origins. So we have also the information about parental education that is always a very relevant variable for this setting. For what concerns the dependent variable, my main outcome, I call it academic experience, and it is the result of a factor analysis from the following items. So I consider these 5 items as indicators of academic experience. So we have the first 3 items are more related to, I would say in some way, the satisfaction of a student about the academic life. And the last 2 are more connected to dropout or changing the field of study. Factor analysis leads to some good results. So the factor loads that you can see in the table are quite high. There is a rule of thumb that they should be at least higher than 0.35. So in this case, we are quite in line. Then the explained variance is about 50%. So also on this point, the one-factor solution seems work quite well. On the picture on the right, you can see the distribution of these variables. And the idea is that high values on this index means a positive academic experience. Then this variable has been standardized to have mean 0 and standard deviation 1 in order to ease the interpretation of the results. So all the coefficients of the models can be interpreted in terms of standard deviation. For what concern the independent variables, the main independent variables, the one that allow me to distinguish between grants and the loans, is derived from the following question. So if you are receiving a public grant or public scholarship or a public loan during the current period, the current lecture period. In that case, on EUROSTUDENTS, there is also a question about private grant and private loan. And at the moment, I'm not considering this variable, but I also have the plan to consider it in the future. Overall, we can see that in our sample, about 1/3 of the students have a grant, and about 8% can rely also on loans. And the vast majority of the students come from the Netherlands. I can anticipate that the results are based on all the countries, but I also ran some robustness check considering only the Netherlands, and the results are pretty stable. And the mediating variables are the work activity, so dummy variable, if you are working or not during the lecture period. And we can see that a good amount of students had some work activity during the lecture period. And then there is also a variable that has been built by EUROSTUDENT that measure the study intensity. In this case, is a 3-category variable, high, medium, and low, and I use it as a dummy variable. And in general, about 30% of the students declare to have a high study intensity. That is a mix of attending the lectures and the time devoted to study. Methods, the first part of my empirical strategy is based on OLS regression. So the Y is the academic experience, the index that I showed you before. And then I have a first model in which I consider only the grant and plus the control variable, the X and the country fixed rate effect. Then a second model in which I consider only the loans. And then a third model in which I look at the interaction between grant and loan. Because in some countries, and in particular in Netherlands, students can rely on both the type of financial aid. The second part of my analysis is a sort of mediation analysis. I use mediation, the term mediation, because now is a sort of fancy term, but at the end of the day, as you can see from the picture, is the old path analysis. So I try to identify the direct and indirect effect of financial aid. So the idea is that we would like to see if job activity and study intensity, the first and the second mediator, can have an impact on academic experience. All the models are also controlled for a wide set of controls variables, and in the slides I will show you only the coefficient for the red lines, the one in which I'm more interested, and also are the lines that will help me to answer to the second research question. Here you can see the first two models, so the first two specification. First, we can see that grants, controlling also for a wide set of controls variables, of covariates, has a positive effect on academic experience. So having a grant increased the academic experience for about 0.09 standard deviation. The effect is not very big, but is statistically significant, while the effect of loans is practically zero. So we have a zero effect of loans on academic experience. Now, the next slide is about the interaction effects. In this case, you can see the predicted value that comes from the model with the interaction. So here you can see the predicted value of the academic experience according to the different combination of grant and loans. So they are both dummy variables, and the combination is it leads to 4 different categories. First, we can see that having no grant and no loan has a negative influence on academic experience, while having at least only the grant, no loans, have a positive effect. What is interesting is that having only the loan or having both loan and grants leads to negative results. These bars are not statistically significant, so they are practically zero. But the interesting point is that having only the grant is better than having both grant and loan in terms of academic experience. Now, the last two slides about the indirect effect of grant. So here we can see that this line, we have several lines. The first line is the one that goes from grants to academic experience, and we have a positive effect, as we also saw before. And what is interesting is that having a grant has a negative effect on job activities. So this is coherent with the rationale of this policy. I supply economic resources and people tend to work a bit less, as a positive effect of study intensity. And also, as we expected, also having a job has negative effect on study intensity. What is the point that is really interesting for this slide is this path, in the sense that having a job has a positive effect on academic experience. Here in this slide, in this presentation, I consider only the information if students have or not have a job, but EUROSTUDENT has also another question that allow the possibility to distinguish between a job that is coherent with the field of study and a job that is not coherent. Here I don't have still the results, but I'm still working on that, and so I can anticipate that clearly having a job that is related, that is coherent with the field of study, has a much more stronger effect on academic experience. And if we consider the job with no coherence with the field of study, this effect is definitely smaller. And also, as you can imagine, also the role of intensity of study intensity on academic experience is positive and is a positive statistically significant. Here we have the same picture for the loans. I will just focus on 3 parameters that are the ones that change more with respect to the previous picture. So first, we can see that the effect of loan on job is still negative, is less significant. So here the significance level is at 0.10, but there is also a huge decrease in the size of this effect. Then the effect of loan on study intensity is practically zero. So it's totally zero. And once we have also this intervening variable, we have a change of the same for the influence of loan on academic experience. So in this model, it turns to be negative. So in general, just to go to the conclusion, we can see that grants seems to be better than loans in producing a positive academic experience. I clearly still use the verb seems because are preliminary results and we are not in a causal framework, so it's just an associational study. There is some mediation effects of job activities, even not always in line with my expectation, because I won't expect it to have this positive effect of having a job on academic experience. But as I said before, this can be, in any case, interesting to deal a bit more on these results. And finally, the future improvement, as I said before, is the one to deeply consider the job activity. I just starting to work on this point, and the result seems to be promising and also reliable. And finally, from a methodological point of view, I would like to try to implement a counterfactual approach. In this setting, will be something based on selection observable, but I will try maybe to go to some matching techniques or also to go a bit more in depth to the mediation analysis that now is still is just the result is just sketch. So thank you very much for your attention, and that's all.
Thank you, Loris. It was very interesting presentation and to see the results. Any questions from our audience, please feel free. To the chat or raising hands, both are fine. It's very welcome. What I was wondering myself is that you mentioned that it would be interesting to see how this changes the results if the job is related to the field of study or not. But I was also wondering that could we also try to check it if we look at different types of work? Is it a gig work, a kind of flexible way of working, or is it like that you work full time, for example, or the intensity of work as well? What do you think of that idea?
Yes, for sure. In this presentation, I just used the simplest variable that I found in the dataset. But if I remember correctly, I should have also a bit more detailed information. So this can be very useful future step to improve this part, because even also because the results are not always in line with my expectation. Probably if I could divide between, for example, jobs done during the lecture periods or during the weekend can make the difference. For example, I have some papers on the University of Bologna on this point, and we can see that this changed a lot. But also in the US literature, for example, working on campus or working off campus can be a relevant, can make the difference. Yep.
Yeah, indeed. There's another question in chat as well that the amount of grants and loans should matter. How did you take the amounts into account in the model?
Oh, in this model, no, it's just having or not having. But also this is a very interesting point. I have to check the data because honestly now I don't remember if there is this information on EUROSTUDENT, but I will check for sure because clearly having or some the amount can make the difference. Yep.
Yeah, I was also thinking about one idea. It's definitely something that you can't check with Eurostudent data, but maybe looking further into the context of those countries. I was thinking that the loan systems are also different because in some countries, I think that you definitely have to pay back the loan, and in some countries, it depends. It's related how high is your salary level after graduation, or if you work in, for example, public sector or something. So the models are probably different and the loan systems as well. And it would be interesting to see whether it has any impact or not.
Yes, for sure. That's also a great point. In this presentation, I used all the countries just because I have a lot of data, so I would like to use all of them. But your comment is very reasonable, and probably maybe I can focus just on a couple of countries and maybe go, as you suggest, more in depth with the context. So maybe I can compare, for example, Austria and the Netherlands. That at least at the level of high school, they are quite similar, and then they differ in terms of the type of financial aid. So in this case, maybe I can take this general picture and then supply also the robustness check with some specific countries, just to be sure that it's not driven by the local context, because clearly if the labor market will give me a prize, if I take a degree, it can be also reasonable to go through the loans because I'm sure that I can repay. And this can maybe have less negative effect on the academic experience.
It's very interesting indeed. I noticed that you have Estonia in your sample as well. And based on my background, I can tell you that is rather like it is a very low share of students who take a loan in Estonia because it is very common to work while studying, and the loan is rather, the amount is rather small as well. But I know that we are going to have a reform, and the government is planning to increase the amount of money you can take as a loan. So it would be also interesting to see how this affects this trend, whether students are going to take more loan or not, and if the amount of loan is actually somehow having an effect on that as well.
Yeah. Here we have a future paper on Estonia.
Exactly.
To check the change in the
Yeah.
in the policy design. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Any
good.
other questions or ideas or comments from our listeners? We still have a couple of minutes if needed. Seems that not at the moment. Anyway, the webinar will be, the recording will be published later as well. So if someone had to leave earlier or wants to share this very interesting knowledge with colleagues, then it will be available. I want to thank you all, Federica, Samuela, Loris.
Thanks.
It was a pleasure to have you here. It has been very, very interesting, and I have enjoyed it a lot. I hope others as well. Thanks to all our listeners for your active participation. And I can already inform everyone that you can save the date for the next EUROSTUDENT Talks. It will be the 12th of December. And it will be the traditional December webinar, which means that we will have 4 student representatives from different European countries to come and share their expectations for the upcoming year, their worries, how is the student situation in their country. So stay tuned, and we'll see you in December on the 12th. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Have a
Bye.
good
Bye.
day. Bye bye. Thank you.